Pierre Poilievre just made a major statement as election news has been heating up over the past couple of days, and Pierre broke down his approach to one of the more controversial issues across Canada. So we'll discuss that, including Jagmeet Singh breaking down the NDP's proposed approach to dealing with the housing crisis across Canada. So there is so much to break down right now in terms of Canadian news. So we're going to jump right into it after we say, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. This is the first video out here on Canada Digest, and we're going to be breaking down daily all of the latest in Canadian news, everything that's going on with this election. So if you want to stay up to date with everything and trying to give a nuanced take on all these situations and everything that's going on, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing that's going on with country of Canada, because things are getting very, very insane, especially over the past couple of weeks, and tend to be trending in that direction with the election just around the corner. So lots of stuff to break down, but let's dive in the first topic, and we'll dive into the NDP's plans for the housing crisis, because frankly, this is very important, because regardless, NDP have a chance of actually getting it or not, having the approach, seeing what people are sort of campaigning on is crucial to understand. And Jagmeet Singh came out with an approach that should, the sentiment should appeal to some people, but we'll break down how people have actually been reacting to it. So essentially, Jagmeet Singh came out and said that why would we invest in building homes that are affordable if then in a couple years those homes are no longer affordable? That would be a bad investment. And that's a big quote a lot of people are running with here right now in regards to what Jagmeet Singh has been saying regarding this whole kind of situation with the housing crisis out there in Canada. And this is a similar kind of adage verbiage that have been brought up by especially Trudeau and the Liberals. Of course, the NDP and Liberals had a coalition government there for a long time. And this, is an interesting sort of approach, because, of course, it does make sense out there on the surface level. And in the short term, it does keep people being able to move into houses, keep the prices low. If you have government intervention, it, of course, keeps those prices low so then people can move into those places. And of course, low-income housing is something that's needed right now, as there are concerns about, the availability of housing across the country of Canada. And so that makes sense. And, protects against bad real estate practices, because of course, the government's going to be putting a ton of money out there in low-income housing. If private contractors are getting incentives from the government to build these things and then immediately jack up the prices, no one really wants to see anything like that either, because we're trying to get more people low-income housing, so people are off the streets. Homelessness, all that stuff is a big issue here right now. But there are concerns that arise with an approach like this, and stuff that's been brought up by the Conservatives. So we'll take a look in terms of how they kind of attack this style of approach to housing right now. Essentially, the Conservative Party came out and said in 2023 that we are not building enough homes fast enough. So this is happening because Trudeau subsidizes government gatekeepers and red tape that prevents builders from getting shovels into the ground and our people into homes that they can afford. The C.D. Howe Institute has shown that in Vancouver, gatekeepers and regulations add nearly $1.3 million to the cost of the average home, and in Toronto, government adds $350,000. That means that over 60% of the price of homes in Vancouver is due to delays, fees, and regulations and taxes. So again, basically what they're saying is if you're adding all these specific restrictions, if you're adding all these, red tape, so to speak, again, that's the conservative language, how it's politically charged is going to be affected by whether it's coming out from the NDP, Liberals, Conservatives, all of those types of things. But essentially what the crux of the conservative argument is when you're sort of, putting all these regulations, you're making sure that there's strict price controls, that all this is going on. Essentially, it disincentivizes contractors to actually build these low-income housing. And with, an influx of immigration, with a lot of people just not being able to find, housing at a reasonable price, there's a supply issue. So the Conservatives, and I've seen Mark Carney kind of make cases like this as well. A lot of people are making this argument that we just need to build more. There needs to be more duplexes. There needs to be more, densely, populated kind of housing across Canada, and need to incentivize actually building those things. Now, of course, it is a serious concern that if you build those things and then contractors, the owners of the buildings, do end up hiking up the prices, then you sort of lose that, the reason why they were built, the positive effects that it would have. But of course, you do need to get them built in the first place. And then if you, inflict artificial price controls, then there's also weird things with supply-demand curves that do have an effect. Economists really, don't like that approach in general unless it's applied very, very strategically across the country. So it's a weird sort of situation that has people going back and forth in the different takes, but tried to show both sides of that approach. But definitely something that Jagmeet Singh has really, really made a focus on in his recent past couple days out there on, the lead up to the election. So let me know what you guys think about that there. But of course, let's dive into the next topic of discussion. What Pierre Poilievre has, he just made a major statement in regards to one of the bigger issues leading into this year's election. And basically, this is the case because essentially Trump made it a case, but it has been a serious issue across Canada over the past decade or so as drug use has been on the rise, and Pierre has essentially come out and saying that's a serious thing he's looking to combat. So essentially, if we take a look at one of his recent tweets, Conservatives will fund treatment for 50,000 Canadians to free them of addiction, and ban drug sites within 500 meters of schools, parks, senior homes, and enforce the strict oversight. So we will bring our loved ones home and drug free. So he's making this a very, very serious point of in his recent rallies. And essentially one of the big quotes, again, coming out from Pierre now at this point is that basically we've lost over 50,000 people to overdoses. The least we could do is, in their honor, save 50,000 more. And this is a legitimate issue. I know it's been overstated, like the fentanyl going south the border. Trump has made a big spell out of that, but this is a legitimate thing. Overdoses have been getting worse across Canada over the past decade, but the big thing, and if you listen to the meat of what Pierre Poilievre has said at his recent rally, the big thing that he was pushing against is the supervised consumption sites. So these are the sort of sites that have been pushed big time by the Liberal government that are harm reduction, right? There are things that essentially rather than criminalizing, rather than saying, hey, you're going to jail, we need to detox, whatever, they're minimizing risk for drug users, people that are addicted to drugs. Of course, it's very, very difficult to get off of something like that. Essentially, it's minimizing risk, taking that approach versus, hey, clean it from your system, throw you in jail, all that type of approach. And that's where the back and forth you've seen, in terms of, the political divide on how to treat this issue. And Pierre's been pretty adamant out here in his rally saying that, these safe, ejection sites, all these things haven't been working. It hasn't been effective, and he's going to plan to change that, looking for more detox sort of systems, ways to actually get people cold turkey off the drugs, or however that approach is, these detox, these sweat baths, all these types of things, specifically in regards to, going in that direction versus these supervised control centers. Now, of course, drug use has been getting worse over the past decade or so. So on a macro level, he is certainly right in terms of the issue has not been solved, and the approach the Liberals have made hasn't made a massive dent in regards to this whole situation. But these supervised control centers, I don't know if that's the route, the avenue that is specifically should be getting targeted, as there isn't a ton of evidence in regards to these supervised control centers not actually being that effective. Essentially, and I'll have all of these things out there, these sources down below in terms of where I'm getting this information, but there's evidence that these essentially institutions have substantial effect in reducing mortality from overdose by intervening to prevent overdoses that may happen within the facilities, and additionally by reducing mortality in the vicinity of the facility itself. A study in the pre and post overdose and mortality rate near the Institute facility in Vancouver, Canada, found that there was a 35% reduction in mortality within 500 meters of the facility within the 3 years of opening. By contrast, overdose deaths in other areas of the city during the same period declined by only 9% in a separate study. We also have another study on this issue that's linked down below that I won't dive into all the scientific jargon, but essentially the takeaways from this was that they keep drug use out of public view while fostering a sense of inclusion for the participants, and essentially the PWDs, so people who use drugs, that's a term that's thrown out there in terms of that, basically are encouraged to use these systems because, again, neglect for any of these systems, whether they're sweat baths, detox centers, these SCSs, they need to be used, right, in order to be effective. So they encourage the utilization. So basically, there's some positives there, and that's That's the stuff that I've been generally getting from these different articles, different reports, different studies about the positive impacts of those. So I think de-emphasizing this is maybe a more politically charged thing because they were supported more so by the Liberals. But of course, change does need to happen. And one thing that people have been concerned about with this whole situation as well is how these things affect their communities. Because, BC, the Canadian province, will make changes to try to stop drug use in public places. Now, the studies indicate that there's less drug use out there in public places, but the public sentiment is that they don't. So there's a kind of direction in terms of how people have been speaking out, the anecdotal stuff that I've been able to sort of collect versus what the studies are specifically saying. And again, that could be neighborhood by neighborhood basis, maybe in totality that things end up going down, but then in an area where these SCSs are built, drug use increases in those spaces. So again, that's just kind of a hypothetical thing there, but BC is trying to stop the drug use out there in public places. There was this study that was broken down out there in Alberta that revealed some serious concerns in regards to the systems that have been in place as of late. Essentially, except for Edmonton, crime as measured by police calls for service generally increased in the immediate vicinity in contrast to areas around the immediate vicinity of these sites. So residents complained about the lack of response calls for service by police, and the site users operators typically believe that essentially there was an exception to a no-go zone for police within the proximity of the site. So evidence suggested a level of de-policing around some of these, specific areas. So of course that leads to crime going up, and that's not a positive thing there for people in the area. And also needle debris was a substantial issue that many residents were complaining about, and used and unused needles, broken crack pipes, and then drug-related paraphernalia being discarded in the vicinity of the sites, which of course no one wants in their area. So essentially, this takes everything back in terms of actual numbers that relate to the things Pierre's kind of say. That majority of Canadians conceptually support safe injection sites, although there's hesitancy about one opening up near them. And that's where things, the whole, balance ends up coming into play, how we're sort of reacting to things, what the actual approach is on these situations. I'd be very interested to see Mark Carney's policy discussions diving deeper into all of these different things, because Pierre has really over the past day dropped a major statement, made this a major point in regards to his whole policy. Because again, while I think some of the things in regards to these, safe injection places are overstated in terms of their lack of efficacy, things do need to be figured out there in these situations, and voters are concerned about these issues, and specifically if they're popping up in their local areas. So we'll keep you up to date in terms of the latest on all of these, situations, developments leading into the election. Not a lot of news from Mark Carney, but we do have a segment we're going to close off all of these videos with, as basically, we're going to do a little bit of poll watch, because it's April 7th here today, and there's some updates. There's some developments out there on the polls here right now, which is very, very interesting, because basically the Liberals still are in the lead. I looked through a few polls. This one puts it in a pretty interesting perspective, but the Conservatives are making a little bit of a push back. So they've had a 1.8 point change out there over the past 3 days. The Liberals had a big boost, and essentially things are certainly still looking very favorable for the Liberals, but we have seen, these jockey positions, and frankly, the weeks leading up to the election are extremely important. People are going to see, they're going to resonate with specific, talking points, see how things end up, coming out there on the run for the election. So it is a very, very important time. There's nothing set in stone here now at this point, across the country in terms of how the government's going to be positioned, even though the Liberals are still favorite. And basically, you can see the tracking data in regards to how things have been going over the last little while. So again, a little downward trajectory, a little upward movement there for the Conservatives. Nothing too drastic here now at this point, but definitely going to be something to monitor over the coming days. So if you want to stay up to date with it all, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button here to Canada Digest. First video, so hoping things came out good. But anyways, subscribe to the channel. I'm signing out. Cheers.